Do we have to paint? No, you don't have to paint. It's an optional thing, but it could really make your piece look like it's actual pottery. So, you know, we're like making it look like something it's not. So that's a faux finish. Acrylic paints are very similar to the paints that most people use on their home, and they are latex-based paints, meaning they're made of plastic. They're plastic paints. And what's good about it is that you can wash your brush out and clean up with soap and water. What's bad about it is it does permanently stain and stick to certain surfaces. If you use a container, just make sure it's something that you don't mind throwing away. Oil paint. When you use oil paint, you have to use really nasty oil-based solvents. So you use oil, you have to clean up with oil. So you would use turpentine, terpenoid, mineral spirits, paint thinner. Oh, those are all really toxic, horrible things for you. And oil paint truly never dries anyway, so it's not a good idea. I'm going to cover this whole thing with this brown shade, and then I'm going to go back and put black acrylic paint where the texture areas are. I'm going to let it dry a little bit, but before it's completely dry, I'm going to take a sponge and I'm going to wipe off the high point so that the black acrylic paint is inside of the crevices and inside of these little lines so that they show up a little bit better. So I'm doing everything I can to bring attention to the texture. I'm just pushing it into the textured areas too. Okay, and this is a bristle brush, so I can really hear it. It's a hard kind of hair, a coarse hair. So if you don't, this is made out of animal hair. It's made out of basically a boar's head is like a pig. It probably comes from the hair on the spine area of a pig, the back of a pig. This is called a bristle hair brush. The hairs are coarse. They're not silky and soft. They're pretty stiff. And what is exactly bristle? Bristle is hair that comes off of the back of a pig. They're called boar's head brushes, but they're from pigs. So when pigs are slaughtered for pork, they make use of their hair too, and they have supposedly longer hairs on their back, like right along the middle of their back and their tail area. So this is where this bristle comes from. There's lots of different kinds of hairs. If you don't like using animal products, like this brush, for instance, here is made out of plastic. So the brush hairs, everything's made out of plastic here. The hairs themselves are, you know, nice and silky and smooth, but they have a firm quality too. So you can use polyester nylon brushes and they will work just fine. I like bristle because it's thick and it pushes the acrylic around, and you can see how thick the acrylic paint is. It looks like melted chocolate. So it is very, very thick and viscous. When you are working, I put a piece of brown package wrapping paper down. To support my work, I have some bubble wrap. These are all things that I can throw away if they get too dirty, and I don't mind them getting messed up. So I used burnt sienna. So acrylic paint, this is like an expensive one made by a company called Liquitex. This is like a red-brown color, but it was too dark. So what I did was I added some white acrylic paint. And not all colors are the same. Have you ever tried to make a lighter color and no matter how much white paint you added to it, it just doesn't seem to get very light colored fast enough? Because lighter color paints are less potent. That means they're weaker in color, so that you need more and more of them to actually shift the color so it changes from darker to lighter. The other side of that equation is dark paint, like black paint. Oftentimes my students will pour on the black paint and then everything will look too dark, because black is a really, really powerful color. So you just need to add like a little dab at a time until you get the shade you want. So not all colors are the same in the way that you mix them. So I had to add a ton of white paint, and I got probably more paint here than I really needed to make. So this fortunately has a lid. This is a Chinese food container. And I just put a lid on it and it will stay perfectly, wet and not dry out because it has a lid. So my pottery is brown. The bottom here is still a little wet from the other day. Not a whole lot wet, but I can tell it's wet because it's still darker color and hasn't changed to this bright light cream. So I'm just gonna brush it on there. And the bristle paint, the bristle brushes, you can just dab it and it pushes. The hairs are so stiff that it pushes the paint into all the little crevices and such. You can buy smaller house paint brushes if you can't get to an art store. If you want to do this, you can even use house paint if you can't get to an art store, because they're almost the same thing. I mean, they say that art paint, the kind you use for art class, supposedly has more pigment. That's why it's a little bit more expensive, even if they give you a small tube or a small bottle or something. That's why it's expensive. It's supposed to have a lot of the coloring agent. And that's what you see here. This is an old container of acrylic paint I found in my closet back at school when I went to clean my room, thinking we would go back. This is the actual pigment or coloring agent. This liquidy, yucky stuff over here is actually the vehicle. So that's what the pigment powder, that's the coloring agent, that's what gives the paint color. That's what it flows in, and it flows in that liquid. So that's what makes the paint basically liquid. It's the vehicle. So all paints have the same thing, which is the pigment, the thing that gives it the color. It's usually a powder, and pigments come from nature or are now manufactured synthetically. But they used to come from all kinds of things. They used to come from animals. Pigments would come from plants, like flowers. The purple paint used to come from sea snails, some part of a sea snail. And that's why like only kings and royal people used to wear purple in Europe, because you would have to collect so many of these sea snails to get enough purple to dye a robe or a cape or what have you, whatever they were trying to get made for the king. A lot of pigments come from minerals or stones, and they crush the stones and they come up with a beautiful color. If you love blue, I know some of you love blue out there, and that may be your favorite color. The most beautiful, nice medium color blue comes from a stone, a semi-precious gemstone they use in jewelry called lapis lazuli. And lapis is mined in only certain parts of the world. So one of the countries famous for lapis is Afghanistan. So they would crush this gemstone to get the powdered color pigment. And then traditionally, before the invention of plastic paints, that happened only in the 1970s. That's how recent acrylic paints are. They used to use oils to mix with the pigment that would produce oil paint. That's what oil paint is. They would mix the pigment with They would mix the pigment with egg. I've heard it's the yellow part of the egg, and I've also heard it's the white part of the egg. I think it's the yellow. I've heard from a lot of places that it was actually the yellow of the egg, the yolk, to make tempera paint. So that's a very matte, non-shiny type of paint. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of different types of paint, and basically they're named after whatever the pigment was mixed with. The vehicle is what gives the paint that particular name. But somebody created a process of making paint out of plastics in the 70s, and then everything took off. So without acrylic paint, think about all the houses and your walls that you wouldn't be able to paint. Before, they used to just use minerals, and I don't know what the vehicle was, but it was certainly not something that was super strong. So in a lot of older residences, ancient residences, the paint is, has just peeled off and is no longer there. There's a lot of things that were painted in antiquity, in art history, statues you might have seen in books that were fully painted, but they no longer have the paint. So all you see is whatever material they're made out of. So acrylic paint, the reason why you might have a t-shirt with a design is because of the invention of acrylic paint, because it is all acrylic paint, some form of acrylic paint. I once bought an expensive brush that was a blue squirrel hair, and bought one, and I didn't like it. It was the brush was so poofy. It felt extremely soft and luxurious, but I feel like I did not know how to use the brush properly. It wasn't the brush's fault, but I didn't know how to quite use that type of hairbrush. And so one day when I really get into watercolors, and watercolors are great because sometimes they come in kits that you can take with you on trips, maybe I'll bring that brush along and really learn how to use that brush properly. Other animals are badgers, and I don't even know how they got that, because badgers are known to be really, really, really nasty. They would definitely attack and bite. They'd probably have to, take it down, I'm sure. First, take it down. Because badgers are known to be, yes, absolutely nasty animals. Human hair, why people don't make human hair brushes, and I'm sure that there is, you don't have to kill the humans. Humans make plenty of hair without having to take them down. I don't know. I would think that there would be everybody's hair is different. Some people have thicker, coarser hair. Maybe that would be good for pushing around, like thicker paint, like acrylic paint. Some people have finer hair. Maybe that's the problem, because everybody's hair is different. They can't just say human hair in general is all the same. It's not, So I think the more rare the animal, the more expensive the brush. Like I said, the most expensive watercolor brush is made out of blue squirrel hair. And apparently blue squirrels, they live in Russia. So a lot of the stuff is like from there, that particular type of bristle brush, or that hairbrush. There are Kolinsky sables are known to be a great brush that you can use on watercolor and oil paint and acrylic, every type, because it's soft, it's absorbent, but it also has a flexibility and stiffness too. So it's an all-purpose great brush for artists to use, but they come off of a sable. And does anyone know what a sable is? Your mom or your grandmom, if they wear fur, they might have a sable coat, or a sable mink, or a sable stole, or whatever. It's something that you wrap around your neck to keep your neck warm. It is a member of the weasel family, and the same family also has what is it? minks, ferrets, ermines, and the hairs also make a really nice painting brush. In order to thin acrylic, you can just use water. But if you get it on your clothes, wash it out right away. If you don't wash it out right away, your clothes are printed. This is printed with acrylic. It's not going to come off. So you need to take care of that right away. So I'm done putting my terracotta. Does it look like clay? Like it's made out of that red clay? When acrylic dries, it will dry a little bit lighter. Just warning you, it will dry a little bit lighter, so you may have to adjust your colors. But I wanted it to dry a little lighter because it looks a little dark right now while it's wet. So we'll see. And then on Monday, I'm just gonna apply some of that black paint and show you the brush on, rub off technique. I use it a lot for a lot of stuff, that particular technique. Okay. Period 3, have a great weekend. Stay safe, okay? All right.